So, hi Tess, welcome to the Beyond the Game podcast. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
So, first of all, let's go back to the start. When you think of your sporting journey, where did it all begin?
Actually started on a rugby pitch, despite being a hockey player. I followed my older brother to Sunday Rugby Club in Cambridge, where I grew up. My dad was the coach of my brother's team, so it was kind of like a family affair. And my family's South African, so rugby is very much a religion. And because I was my little sister to my older brother, I just wanted to follow him. So I went along and just loved the team aspect. It was all tag rugby, so I was just extremely enthusiastic. But unfortunately, when I hit age 11, girls had to stop playing rugby because there wasn't a girls' team. And when we moved to contact rugby, they wouldn't allow girls in the team. So a Sunday morning became free, and my mum thought, oh, well, I'll take you to Sunday Hockey Club in Cambridge City Hockey Club. And so I went and picked up a stick at age 11, and that was it.
And was it something that you picked up quite quickly, or was it something that took a while for you to get into the groove of?
Well, hockey's quite hard generally because it's a stick, you can only use one side of it, and trying to communicate that to an 11-year-old is quite difficult. I think naturally all of the passing aspect and the competitiveness and the character that surrounds sport was very natural to me. I played judo when I was younger as well, and that sort of attitude to training and to competition was always inside of me. And then I think technically I just became really, really interested in how I could technically be better on the hockey pitch, and how I could help my team more. And I loved scoring goals. I love scoring goals. So it was sort of like, how can I be better to do that? And I think that sort of really started from age 11, and then I'm 25 and I'm still wanting to score goals.
Always a good sign as a striker. And as you started to progress through, you obviously played a little bit of club. Did you played at university as well?
I played under 16 England, then the following year under 18, the following year under 21. And so within 3.5 years, I moved from the under 16s at age 15 to the under 23s and getting my senior debut at 19. It was a very whirlwind sort of experience. But yeah, I mean, I played at Cambridge City Hockey Club and was lucky enough that my school, the Purse in Cambridge, said that I didn't have to do Saturday matches with our age group team. So they gave me license to go and play with the women's team, which was a huge advantage because I was playing and learning from so many very talented women. We've got into the National League, the one below the Premier, which is what I play now. And so I was from age 14 chucked up front and told to go and do a job for us. But I mean, more than that, like, I loved having the little interactions with my teammates and like the banter that would go on between us. All my teammates had nicknames: Pants, Monkey, Stan, and obviously I still think those are their real names. But that sort of hockey culture, the family feel really got me into it. And then when you are playing for suddenly you're in a league that matters. It's not just a school game. You want to get promoted. That sort of obsession with the team doing well, I think, really took me to the next level. And I went to Durham University and played in the first team my first year, and then at the beginning of my second year, got my call up and had to say goodbye to Durham.
You were 16, kind of thrown in the deep end. What did you learn so early on in your career about hockey and potentially yourself just kind of being thrown in and having to fend for yourself in an adult league?
I learned that don't take feedback too seriously and too personally. No, generally, I think what I learned most from 16 to 18 was having to make friends quickly in a team and being a person who's wanted in a team, and that's somebody who's very coachable, good energy, sort of positive, and gets on well with all teammates. When I was at primary school, I felt quite excluded a lot of the time. I was very different from my peers, and until I went to the Purse and then Cambridge City, I didn't really feel like that difference was a super strength, but it is, and it's what separated me from, I guess, if you like, the pack. And that has meant that I'm very inclusive always in groups, and I never want to have a clique. I always want to make sure that the new person is feeling welcomed, because a team needs every member, and I firmly believe that. And so when I joined Cambridge City Hockey Club as a 14-year-old scrawny kid, they took me in and they showed me what family was. And so I have a lot of places where I've been, I guess, the odd one out, but I've been included, and so I carry that now very strongly.
Yeah, perfect. And one thing you mentioned there was being very coachable as a player. What does that mean to you?
I think every player needs to understand that they don't know everything and that they might have a super strength. I think you have to be in a mindset which is, how good can I be, rather than, why is the coach telling me I'm not the best. I've always just had a curiosity for the game, and that's me going out and playing by myself on the Astro with some music and going and experimenting. But it's also having conversations with coaches about how I can be better, and not forcing it, but sort of letting it come naturally. And I think even today, the reason why I'm still playing hockey is because I still want to learn and I still want to be better. And that's a really fun journey if you choose to see it that way. Otherwise, it can be quite a daunting task. You know, if you say you want to be the best in the world, that's a lot of hours you have to put in. But if you look at it in curiosity, and you change it and you say, could I be the best in the world? I think that's a real mindset shift. And I'm not saying that I am the best in the world, by no means, but could I be the best at one thing? For example, could I be the best in the 7 yard area in and around the D? Could I do that? I don't know. Could I go to the Olympics? I hope so. But I'm always trying to chase, could I?
That's a great mindset, and yeah, pulling it back to fun. I think, especially at the level that you're still playing at, having fun and enjoying it must still be a huge part of it.
It's quite difficult sometimes. I saw a clip of a marathon runner who was just saying, why do I do this to myself? Why do I choose to wake up in the morning and do a marathon? And I am by no means running a marathon, but I often feel that way. But it comes back to that enjoyment and really the freedom. Like the Olympic qualifiers that I've just been in Valencia, with the most stressful 3 weeks of my life. And I felt, as my teammates did, stressed and hoping that we were going to come together, not hoping, but trying to make sure that we got qualification. You think your life rides on it. A bit of perspective always helps, and that's why I do the work outside of hockey, because it makes me realize that putting the ball in the back of the net is not as important as making sure that all women have the right to abortion. Do you know what I mean? So it's like small fry, but at the same time, what we do on the hockey pitch makes a big difference, and we can become role models and we can do different things. It means something to somebody else, what we do. So I think perspective and having a sense of humor when you train is really important. And sometimes you will sky it over the crossbar. Sometimes you just got to laugh.
Yeah, I think we've all been there. We've had those days when nothing's going right. You've just got to try and roll with the punches, laugh it off, and hope that the next session goes better, really. So we talked about it a little bit there, alluded to you've kind of been through the ranks. You've played from under 16s. You were in the youth setup as well for like England and GB. How did it feel getting your first England call up, and how did your career change from that point onwards?
I watched the 2018 London World Cup, and I watched us lose in the final, in the quarterfinal, sorry, against Holland. And for some reason, I was just in tears, and I had this like wave of emotion come over me, and it was, I want to play at the World Cup. I want to be on the stage. And because I was in the under 23s, I thought maybe I could go for Paris. That was 6 years away. Little did I know that 3 months later, I was on a plane to China getting my debut. The phone call came, and I was like, really? The head coach of GB Hockey wants to talk to me? Bizarre. And they invited me to train because we had the Champions Trophy in a month's time. And he said, if things go well, that you could be on the plane to China, or we could offer you a full contract because it's full-time profession. At the time, I just started my second year degree. I didn't want to ever jeopardize my academics. So I made a pact with myself that I would go and I would trial and I would give it my all. But if they didn't take me to China, then I didn't want to make that sacrifice for a maybe for the next 18 months. And I didn't want to do that because of how much I loved university. So I went in and I trialed and I was firing on all cylinders. And fate just so happened that he invited me to join the program and took me to China. But it meant that I had to split my degree part-time and essentially do my degree over another 4 years. So it took me 5 years to graduate, which has actually, in hindsight, been a blessing because I've been able to go really deep into my modules and go really deep into my dissertation. And so in hindsight, it has worked out really well. But, it was a very hard decision to go from Durham to Bisham Abbey. If you ask how I felt, it was sort of radical inspiration and sort of jumping straight into the flames. And it was a baptism of fire because being an international athlete at age 19, starting life basically as an adult, is pretty scary.
So I know we alluded to this earlier. You started in the under-16s. You've now worked your way up all the way into the senior squad, and you're now a very established player. How do you go around kind of creating a positive culture and reinforcing standards in that role of being a senior player in the team?
I think we don't put the human first enough in performance sport, and that's something that I'm really passionate about. I think what constitutes a high performance culture, and you hear it so much on the High Performance podcast, it's very different things for very different people. For me, I want to see high standards at training, of course, but I want to see humanity. And for me, it doesn't happen enough. So something that I'm really passionate about is the small things, the small details around welcome ceremonies, making sure we understand that our history of our team, doing something more than just playing hockey every day, which is noble in itself, but it means nothing in the grand scheme of the universe. So how are we changing culture whilst we're doing it? I think it's something that I didn't do enough when I was a younger player, but really, really wanted to change the culture to be people first and player second. So a high performance culture is not everybody being robots. And I think you get the best out of people when you see them for who they are. And I would really, over the last, like now as a senior player, I really want to see everybody's characters come out, because when people shine on the pitch is when you see their character. And perhaps their character is a quiet character that enjoys reading, but I want to know that. I want to know that. And so I've really been putting a lot of effort into that side.
Yeah, if you had to give any tips to people on how they could kind of make culture in a sports team a little bit more human, what sort of advice would you give them?
I really think there's a huge strength to having a coffee and a walk with somebody rather than having a coffee in front of somebody, because conversation naturally flows when you're on a walk. And something that I heard from Leah Williamson actually about the Lionesses culture and about why they won the Euros, she said it was so uncomfortable, but they had 6 weeks from when they joined to the Euros. And she said in the first 2 weeks, we were randomly paired up with multiple different people. Every evening they had different people to go and have dinner with, and everything was randomized so that there was no cliques. And I'm not saying that my team is very cliquey, but I'm saying that that is what I would advocate for, because you're only going to break down barriers if you understand people. You're only going to receive feedback from somebody about, make that a better pass, make that a better trap. I need you to perform here doing this. You're only going to take that if you respect the individual. And I think that is where performance teams go really wrong, is they start with the high challenge and they think that high support is weak. And a lot of that's come from a very masculinized culture of that sort of hard, suck it up, very much sort of aggressive mindset. And there's a way to be high performance with a merge of two different energies, and I'm very passionate about bringing that other energy, because we have the very masculinized energy in abundance. But you look at the lionesses, they may not be best friends with each other, and that's not the point. But the point is they understand each other at a deeper level. And people say, "Oh, I'm not that deep," though. It's fine if you're not that deep. Like, just have a chat about, what were you like growing up? Those sorts of questions help you unpick characters. If you're in a high performance team about to go to the Olympics and your money's on the line, you want to know why your teammate is diving back post. You want to know those reasons, and people have different reasons. And I think if you know that, then you'll come together a lot more. It's something I still think our GB team needs to do. So it's maybe not one for your under 10s team, but it's definitely one for your university team or your club team, to really understand, why is everybody there? Like, why do you care?
That's a really nice tangible action for people to take away. As you say, a lot of the time behaviors can be explained by really simple kind of measures of understanding someone, and by actually taking the time to get to know people, not only do you make them feel more comfortable, more likely to be themselves, but that's also going to encourage them to perform at a higher level.
Good.
So, Tess, what are the realities of being a professional hockey player? What are some of the positives? What are some of the challenges that you face?
I mean, the positive is that I get to play hockey every day and people pay me for that. I mean, that's a weird world that we live in. I think I'm very lucky to be in a sport which is valued. Even if it's not valued like football, it's still valued some way. And people want to watch it, which is brilliant. And it just so happens that I'm good at that sport, so I've ended up here. And I think I'm very lucky in that sense, that I can do essentially my hobby as my profession. The reality, of course, is that there's a grueling amount of training, fitness, hard conversations. You're looking at yourself in the mirror. How much do I want this? You're having, to organize your nutrition. It might not be where you need it to be, so you have to pick yourself up again, look at yourself in the mirror and say, how much do I want it? And I've been there countless times over the last 6 years where I have said, am I continuing? Am I keeping on going? When I was 22, right before the Olympics, exactly 100 days before the Olympics, that I was quite confirmed to go to. So that's Tokyo. I ruptured my ACL, and that was the worst moment of my life, probably, because everything I had been building to got taken away. But more than that, my love of the game. I couldn't play for 12 months and I had to be in a gym rehabbing. And that's a brutal reality of sport. And unfortunately, in women's sport, ACLs are very common. So, I mean, they're not common, but in the grand scheme of things, they get reported quite a lot. And why mine happened, I don't know. The fact that it was 100 days, I don't know. The fact that it was on the 13th of April, that's not cool. Unless you're a Taylor Swift fan, and then that is cool. But those are the harsh realities. So to be able to play hockey again, to be able to do essentially my job, I had to do 11 and a half months of grueling rehab. And when I say grueling, I mean absolutely freaking grueling. Surgery, learning to walk again. They take hamstring grafts, so you have to rebuild your hamstring, your quad. Then you have to learn to run again, to jump, to play hockey, etc., etc. And much of that is muscle memory, but your leg is just an absolute dweeb. That was really hard, and very truthfully, and I believe in being truthful, I fell into a very dark depression, which is a natural stage of the grieving process. Not only was I grieving 12 months out of the game, but a lost Olympics, and also potentially a lost medal because we won bronze. So there was a lot of layers. Fortunately, I had a second sort of identity, which was my academic side, which could really flourish. But it got to a stage where even that was too much for me to do, and getting out of bed and going to training was hard enough. But at the same time, when you're thrust into the darkest parts, you can really see what you're made of. And I would not be the person I am today if I hadn't have had that injury, that heartbreak, and again, perspective. It's not the end of the world. No one's died, etc. And, in a way, I thought a part of my identity died, but what I realized, and it was actually the turn of the year going into 2022, when the World Cup and Commonwealth Games were only 6 months away. I recorded a video, and I still have this video, and I said, we're going to win the Commonwealth Games. And lo and behold, we did. And I scored the winning goal. And, I wasn't in a great shape. I was at the right place at the right time to touch that ball in the goal against Australia. But in terms of how my journey to get from being in a very dark place to scoring in the Commonwealth final is a lot of grit and determination. And I had to really look at myself in the mirror and think, do I really want this? And for some reason deep down, I did.
You had that injury 100 days out from what is probably something that you've dreamt of your whole life. And injuries are bad at the best of times, but an incredibly awful time to get injured. As you said, you kind of really struggled with that, and obviously being an athlete is part of your identity. But for someone that's struggling at home, that's gone through something and really struggling to galvanize and find their way out of it, what advice would you give them?
Yeah, it's so easy to give advice to people who are in dark places. I can tell you what I did, though. I actually watched Don't Look Up, which is a film which is essentially a metaphor for climate change. And spoiler alerts, but at the end of the film, the screen just goes black. And it was the biggest sort of aha moment. And this was on New Year's Eve. And I was shocked, so shocked that it woke me out of whatever I was in. And I couldn't go to sleep because I was just thinking, that's it. The world literally could end with an asteroid or climate change. We are in such a finite position. And it was almost like get over yourself, Tess. It's okay. You can do this. You could potentially go to the Commonwealth Games if you get yourself in a fit position, if you do everything correctly. And it was that opportunity for the screen not to go black. Essentially, my screen had gone black in my hockey, and I realized that it didn't have to go black. So that is remarkably a very, very true story. And these moments happen in my life, and I don't know if it's manifestation, I don't know what happens, but I think you put energy out into the world and sometimes you can get it back. And what I had been doing for my sport and trying to change a narrative on clothing and doing my dissertation and all of that, I felt like this was my moment to take back my athletic identity as well as the academic identity and sort of say, do you know what, world, I've still got so much more in me. So if somebody's going through something and they're lacking that inspiration, it comes back to that curiosity. And I was curious if I could get to the Commonwealth Games. I kind of knew I could, but was I actually going to do it? So yeah, I would say to anybody who's listening, just see how good you could be in whatever. And that could be something really small. It's all about small wins. Because I didn't just go straight from, being in a very dark place. I actually rechanged my entire structure. So I got up at 6 a.m. every morning because I knew I had to have a radical shift in my mindset. 6 a.m., 6 to 8, I worked because that's my happy place, really. That's, it's quiet. I did my studying and I had to write sort of 2 essays in a month or so. So I spent that time in the morning. I had my routine. I had my coffee. I had my turmeric shot for my knee. And then at 8 o'clock, I'd have breakfast. And then I would go to the gym to start my rehab at 9. And then when I got back in the evening, it was probably like 7 o'clock, I'd have dinner. And then I would go to bed because I was exhausted from getting up at 6 a.m. And then I would do the whole thing again. And I got excited to get up every day and see what I could do. And those 2 hours were it was just beautiful. Before it was, early January, before the sun had come up, and I was like, I'm doing this. I'm doing this. I also did a checklist on my wall and ticked off every day to the Commonwealth Games. Um, Bizarre.
Yeah.
Obsessed.
Yeah, but it's a very good journey, and I think it's, as you've kind of alluded to there, it's all about breaking down habits. It's making small things that make a big difference to your outlook. I also recently came across a quote from Dr. Andrew Huberman. I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but he's a psychologist based out of the US, and he was basically talking about the reason that we should choose to do hard things is so that when challenges that are non-elected arise, we know what we're doing. We're used to conquering, and I think that sounds very, very similar to the mindset that you have as well.
It's Glennon Doyle's quote that I love. I read her book Untamed, and it's "We can do hard things." And that simple word of "can" really, really changes the whole thing, because it becomes a choice. And I think what I had been going through was that this wasn't my choice. Nobody says they're thankful for their ACL, and I'm not thankful for my ACL injury. I'm grateful for the lessons, but I'm definitely not thankful for it. And nobody can ever say that they are, unless they're barking mad. And so, a really interesting point of this whole grieving process was that somebody told me straight away, you're going to go through anger, denial, depression, bargaining, and then you'll end up with acceptance. And I was like, how am I ever going to accept this? I don't agree with that. And then I listened to a podcast, and they actually said there's a hidden sixth stage, which is called creating meaning. And so if you create meaning from your loss, then you can accept it. But you can't just accept it straight out. You don't go from depression to acceptance. That's just not a thing. You have to find meaning. And then as soon as I sort of listened to that and sort of slowly processed it, I was like, okay, what is my meaning? And now my meaning is that I have a badass story to get to the Commonwealth Games. And it's a classic, everybody wants to hear the sort of the comeback, the setback comeback story. I just never thought it would be my story.
And so we take a moment to just reflect on everything that you've just told us there. You've gone through this incredibly hard injury. You've been in the depths of a really dark place, really struggling, and then managed to galvanize the strength and determination to fight back against everything that's happened. And then you're stood on the pitch, you're playing in the final, the ball meets your stick. It must have been just a real full circle moment.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest excitement was that the wall, which is what we called it, of 10,000 watching, erupted. And when I score, or when we score, and I see the team's elation and then the crowd's elation, that is very special. And I always pause the video to watch the moment that the ball goes in the net and everyone in the crowd's arms go up, because it's like I was part of that. And the fact that it was history doing it as well, winning Commonwealth gold, with some very special teammates as well. I would love to say that I was in a great headspace and it was all led up very nicely, but I actually was still quite sad and really, really struggling. And so despite being on the podium and being elated for that day, getting drunk, singing singing the national anthem, Jerusalem, which is the one that they sing for Team England, and it's one of my favourite songs, and it was all very surreal. But I get back from the Commonwealth Games. We had another tournament to play at the end, which was European qualifiers. But I get back from that summer, and I just need to escape. So I go to South Africa for 2 weeks, and it's not enough. And essentially, I had been on a treadmill for 18 months, and I was exhausted, and I wasn't given a break really, and I had to go again essentially. And I truly burnt out in that sort of October period. And so, I love to, end the story at Commonwealth Games. But if you want the real harsh reality, the story really only ended last summer when I wore shorts for the first time, and I felt like I could be myself on the pitch in many different ways. I felt, I had my body back. I was wearing shorts and I felt myself. It's been a freaking long journey to get there, but so there is often a legacy of injuries that we don't see. And I wonder how Leah Williamson and Beth Mead are doing right now, because they're essentially in their sort of post-honeymoon period of getting back on the pitch. And you realise how tired you are from the 12 months of rehab.
I think that's a really poignant point to make, that it's been a continuous uphill battle to get there. And I think it's one for people to realise that even though you see people that are in the moment having this amazing time, that a lot of the time behind the scenes there's still things going on. It doesn't tell the full story, one picture. Thank you for sharing that with us. It's a really good and honest account of your journey.